So yeah, just to say, we're all really excited about this project and it's a lot of fun for us, but also it's something we think is so much fun. But at the moment, we're still at the stage where what we're doing is not very good. So we want it to be better and we're trying to, I mean, I think it's okay. We've got some good stuff to show you and hopefully it'll be a fun afternoon. But for us, the focus is on trying to get to a point where we can be really creative. In the easy way, in that way that creativity is easy, and that can take longer than we like. You know, with technology, technology seems to often get in the way, and our job is to try to work out how to stop that from happening and make the technology something which we can be creative with. And so that's why these sessions are really important for us. So they are really important because if we get feedback from everybody about what they like and what they don't like, that helps us work out where the barriers are. Helps us make things easier for everyone. What we're going to do is in the first half of this session, we're mainly going to show off some new features that we've put in there based on feedback from the last couple of sessions that we've had. So these are things that we've observed could be helpful and that people have said they deliberately want, which we've then put together and tried to make available. And Josh is going to show them off and then we're going to have a break. And then we're just going to do the main practical part, which is to do something similar to what Josh and I are going to be showing, but without us doing them, with you just doing them on your own. And then just getting into it and having a good old sesh. And then telling us, now there's going to be problems, there'll be issues, there'll be mistakes and things that we don't expect. And if you can, bear with us while we work those out. Things should work the way we expect them to, but sometimes things just break. Hopefully everything will be fine, but if not, your patience is very, is very kindly received. Thank you. So if you've finished the survey and clicking, I can move on. Or if there's anything else that we need, is anyone still struggling to access the survey? Are we all right? Okay, great. So, so what you can see here is a really terrible web page. And what we really like, so there's a bunch of things that we want out of today, and one of them is to find a team or a group of people in the project who can help us work out what this should look like on the front. Because behind the scenes and all the tech and all the things that make the VR worlds happen, I think we have all that stuff covered. We know what we're doing there. But in terms of how information is displayed, how it looks, what kind of, where materials are, how educational materials are displayed, we don't really have any idea. So any kind of help or anyone who wants to contribute, we really want to listen and we want to know what we can do, and also we want to share. So the plan is that we're going to make, we still haven't quite done it yet, but it is going to happen. This will become a public repository, a public software repository where anybody can make suggestions about how it looks, where tutorials go, where learning information will be stored, what features and functions will be available, all of those things. And then we want to work with everyone on the team to get that done. And we will be able to do some of it, but there are other bits which we will need help with. But this is our rubbish beginning site, which is basically a NAF picture and a NAF label. NAF is an English word meaning not very good. And so, but basically it's similar to our platform that we've used before. And what we've done is we've listened to some of the feedback that we had about the amount of typing people had to do. And we've wanted to create a system whereby you can be flexible and creative and also collaborate, but where you are able to make things by clicking buttons and making selections rather than typing a lot, particularly if it's something you have to type over and over again. So we started with that, and what we haven't tested at all is what happens if you try to collaborate on the same document when you do that. So everyone's going to try and do that later on, and it's going to be, it might work. Like me and Josh literally just tested it 20 minutes ago, and it seemed to work. It seemed to work, but that doesn't mean anything. But it might be okay. So we're sort of still in the opening stages. But also I want to say, Josh is going to give you a tour of these changes and going to show you more or less a couple of tasks which we're then going to ask you to do. Is that all right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I just want you to all know that Josh is the person who's been working extremely hard to put this platform together for us. And so everything that he shows you is based on things that we already had, but there's a substantial amount of work which has gone into this, also thinking about how it should be organised. And before I let Josh say something important, I'm going to say one more less important thing, which is that the way we've tried to create this means that because everything is code. At the end of the day, everything is code. And the way we've tried to create this is so that there's never a point where you won't be able to access the code and get the code and put it somewhere else. Because what we're trying to avoid is having a system which lacks transparency, which you can't then control. Yeah. And so what we're actually doing, the interface that will show you, what it's actually doing is making code edits, very specific code edits, whilst you're interacting, and then pulling a bunch of tricks to make the new virtual reality world. So, and if you wanted to, you could download all the code that you create when you're interacting and edit it by hand. You can even do that whilst you're making it. So we haven't removed that, and we'll keep that. But what we're trying to do is make sure that we don't lose that, so that people who want it can still do it, but make it so that it's much more accessible going in. Right, I've said too much. I'm going to hand over to Josh, and Josh is going to demo the platform for about half an hour-ish, and then we'll have some questions. Sound good?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Cool.
off you go.
Also, as has been mentioned today, this is a project which is based on a previous project called Mimic. So if you hear me calling it Mimic at any point, it's this. That's just the prior name, which we've kind of got used to. Okay, so when you first open up that link, this is the page that you'll get greeted with. Most of you will have seen this before, or the Mimic version of it. If you haven't, or if you haven't been on it in a long time, you'll need to either sign up or log in. So this button in the top right-hand corner will take you to either a login. So if you remember your old username and password, do log in. If not, you can just create a new user. It will take 2 seconds. You just need to give it a username and a password. There's no extra gunk that you need to kind of log in with. So I'm going to log in. By the way, if you do notice anything that's not working, like, I won't be offended or surprised. So a lot has kind of changed in the last month or so feel free to say.
Yeah, we expect there to be things that don't work.
Yeah. Okay. When you have eventually logged in, the way to kind of create a new document, and the only sort of, the only thing you really need to worry about for today is under this My Projects tab. So to create a new document, and the word document will make sense to you once you see it, it's this little plus icon at the bottom. Once you've got if you've got a new user account, this whole menu should be empty, so you shouldn't see all of this. These are all just kind of like random old projects. So this plus button at the bottom will make a new document. So this is what we mean by a document, and this is what Mick was kind of saying when he said everything is code. So it's interesting, this following on from the Frame VR demo, because Frame VR fundamentally is a very similar sort of technology which we're kind of like building towards and is building on top of. But Frame VR out of the box comes with a lot of polish and a lot of nice features and kind of like handy buttons and that sort of thing. But ultimately, obviously, that is just kind of a big code base, and there's a lot of code in there. What we're kind of like aiming to is kind of like a similar sort of like platform to Frame VR, something that's kind of very easy and intuitive to use, and kind of like the ability to kind of like drop assets in, load models, change colors, move around, that kind of thing. But with also the access to kind of like the underlying technology, so you can actually sort of like manipulate it on a slightly more personal way or individual way. So basically giving you access to the code document which makes up that 3D environment. And this is the code document which makes up this 3D environment. So if I hide the code and click in this space, immediately I'm in 3D world, and much like with Frame VR, I can move around with WASD keys or the arrow keys. Once you've clicked into it, you need to press escape to then come back out of it and have control of your browser.
So yeah, I'm going to repeat that. if you're trapped in the world of VR and you can't get out, press escape. And then you'll get your very simple. Yeah.
Yeah, just press it.
It happens to me. It happened to me just this morning. I was like, ah. Oh, yes.
All right, I'll do that again. So once you're logged in, this should be the screen that you see. To create a new document, click on the My Projects tab, little plus icon at the bottom. You shouldn't have a list as long as this when you've just made a new account. Plus button, and then you should see the screen, and you should have your own VR world. To get into your VR world, so you can hide this code pane, this code window, by clicking this little arrow here. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse. I'll zoom in. So you can hide that, click into the window, and then you're in. And then you can move around using the same controls as with Frame VR this morning, and you can look around with your mouse. Well, similar controls. You look around with the mouse, whereas Frame VR, it was the A and D keys. And then to get back out, it's escape. This button in the corner, this is really how you enter the kind of the immersive virtual reality environment. This will open it up full screen, and yeah, it's the same thing, but you're full screen. And if you were to be wearing a VR headset, and if you had this open in the browser in the headset, this is what you would see once you click that button. And again, it's escape to get back out. Okay, so as I kind of briefly mentioned, this code that you see here is literally the code which is making up this simple environment on the left. And for those of you that did the very first workshop we did with Mimic, that should be familiar. What we're trying to work towards is kind of a way of kind of building up a document, and ultimately the VR world is going to be based on some text document like this. And previously we were asking you to kind of like copy and paste chunks of code or write code into it. One of the new things we have, and it's not a perfect sort of way of doing it, but ultimately we're kind of like trying to find ways of like still writing the code but doing that for you. So up here there's a new button which is add code snippet. See this like plus icon at the top, and I'm just going to hide this for now because actually we don't need to see it. I'm going to just refresh just so the view is normal. So this pause and play button is kind of like a refresh. I'm going to add a code snippet. I'm going to click on a frame box. You get this kind of like intermediate menu appear. I'm not too worried about that for now. I'll look at these details in a second, but for now I'm just going to press insert and a box appears. Not particularly glamorous or exciting.
It's just a rubbish box.
It's just a red box.
No, but this is new, right?
But this is new. That's Chris.
By popular demand. We now have a box in
We've
the
got a
scene.
box. Yeah. I'm done. So this is kind of like the main thing that we've been working on recently. So this snippet edit, obviously the box isn't the only one, but if I open up this menu again, this kind of takes some of the hassle of writing code out of it for you. There's only a few details, there's many details are in this list that you need to worry about. You do still need to kind of like manually set the position, but you can now set rotation, width, height. So anyway, whatever. If I just quickly add another box.
I was just going to say, there are other ways of moving things around now.
Yes.
So we'll get to those.
I'll show you this for now. So if I add a box, so just to kind of like a little recap, this is the sort of thing that just gets more intuitive with practice. But these three numbers represent a position in X, Y, and Z space. So if you've ever done any 3D modeling, that might be a bit more natural to you. But X, Y, and Z are the three axes in 3D space. So
X is this way, Y is this way, and Z is that way.
So if this red box initially appeared at 0, 1, -3, so that's 0 in the X, 1 in Y heights, -3 is -3 away from you. The number, they say it roughly is equivalent to a meter, but it's just a unit of measurement, doesn't really matter. So if I want to move something slightly to the left, I'll just add 2 here and maybe slightly further back. If I change the color, now these colors, this initially is what's called a hex code color. It's just a numerical representation of color. But because this is all based on the web, we can use what known as CSS colors, which are actually more human readable colors. So we can actually write in things like light blue. I can maybe share a list of all the available CSS colors. Obviously, it doesn't actually understand what you're saying, so you can't just make up a color and it'll figure it out. Anyway, insert that, and there's my light blue box. I got my axes mixed up. I wanted it to the left, but it's actually ended up to the right. But not a problem.
The other thing to say is that if the second number in the position is a minus number, don't be surprised if you can't see it, because it might be under the floor.
Yeah, that's a good point. So maybe just kind of show you like one of the other sort of like things which now is sort of like a standard. I don't know if you've noticed the little white dot which is in the middle of the screen, which kind of represents where I'm looking.
This bit is really fun, actually.
So in 3D world, as you move around, you can also see it turns into a hand at certain points. That means something is grabbable. So once that little hand appears, if you press E on your keyboard, you can pick things up. Now these, the way they're currently set up is if I let go, it should just kind of stay there floating in space. Which that's kind of cool. If you're kind of like building a scene, you can kind of move things around. Unfortunately, as it stands, it's not going to change in its current form, but if I refresh the document, everything's going to go back to where it was when you first created it. It may well be, I mean, we'd love it to be a feature eventually where you can actually...
I think we've got it.
Got it?
I think I've got it done.
Okay, well, it won't be long until you can actually freeze the scene, basically. So again, it's kind of like this idea of giving you kind of like every option to kind of build the scene how you want. This kind of in a way is more similar to the frame VR way of building a world where you're in the world, you're only in the world, and that's your view of the world. That's how you move things around. In some instances, that is quite fun, and particularly in a collaborative instance, if you imagine 10 people in this world moving things around and scaling things, that would be quite fun. As it stands now, if I refresh this, everything will go back to normal. So maybe if I just demo that. So everything you do via this kind of snippet editor, it's called a snippet editor because it's adding snippets of code into the code. So these things are new things which have appeared as I've been making it. And also a nice thing to know that this is just like a live text document. So in the same way as with sort of like Google Documents, you can undo and redo, same thing. So if I don't like what I just added, I can do Control Z. So Control Z being undo, or Command Z if you're on a Mac. And I can undo those changes and the document updates and those boxes are gone.
So, Josh, can I just ask? If you've added things via the snippet menu, and then you undo when you click on the code menu by doing Control Z, does it still undo it even though it was inserted by snippet?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So if you add the thing in via the plus, by the snippet, and then it will still undo it as text.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah. And so Christine was just asking that if you add something and you want to change the color after the fact, that is where you would then need to go into the code. So let's add a cylinder. I'm going to change this position because 0, 0, 0 will probably appear below the level of the floor. So I'm just going to raise it up a little bit and move it back a little bit. And let's give it a color of yellow and insert it. And where's it going? Let's check the code. Okay, don't add cylinders. There's a bug. Let's add a sphere. There we go. Sphere works. Spheres are fine. So, okay, say I've added this sphere and you can see actually, well, I don't know if you can tell this, but it's actually sort of intersecting the floor. So say, oh no, I want to move that up a little bit and I want to change the color. I would go into the code. This is the sphere that I've just added. And you can see here, the color is just there as In programming world, text is referred to as a string. So again, if you hear me say the word string, it just means it's a snippet of text. So this string is the color. So let's change that to yellow. And I know that this is its position in space. So I want to raise it up a little bit. Let's make it 1.5 in the Y direction. And I'm going to hide the code, and it's moved up a little bit, and it's now yellow. So that's cool.
Yeah, the ground plane, the default ground plane is quite small, so it's quite easy to accidentally step off and then fall to the ground.
Yeah, that's another good example of something you might want to change. So
yeah, so is it a box or is it a plane? What's the ground?
It's a box, and it needs to be a box for it to be the floor, unfortunately, because it needs a bit of depth.
Right. So it's a floor because there's a keyword in the code that says floor.
There is also that.
And that's literally all. If you want something to be a floor, as in something you can stand on, you just have to write the word floor inside the tag.
We can do that now as well. So like say, I don't know if anyone has noticed as well, but if you walk off the edge of the floor, you do fall, and you fall forever. That is where you'd probably want to refresh your code. Also, perhaps at that point, you might want to make the floor slightly bigger. So our floor here has a certain width and a depth. I mean, this is slightly confusing. Height, obviously, is kind of up and down. So it has a slightly small height, but large width and large depth. It's front to back. So if we make those bigger, let's up that to 50 and 50. And it should auto update, and you can see we've got a much bigger floor to move around on. Now, let's say we wanted to add another platform somewhere. So I'm going to close this, open up my snippet editor. Again, this is maybe slightly misleading, but you should know this now. But if you wanted a floor, you need to create a box. And there is a keyword in here, or an option in here to set it as a floor. So this isn't ideal. You need to type the word true. Ideally, it would be a button or something, but it's on the to-do list. I'm going to set the position to what do I want to do? So exactly where I am. Don't want it up or down, but I want it way off in the distance. So let's go minus 55. Width, let's make it big again. Let's make it 50 and 50. One height, light blue is nice enough. And let's try that. So there we go. So now we've got another big platform over here, which is light blue. I am walking over to it.
And then hopefully you won't fall to the, you've got to jump.
Okay, there's a little gap, but this is another opportunity to show you another little feature. For those of you that have used VR games before, quite often a way of moving around is the kind of like the trigger, and you get this sort of invisible arc, which kind of shows where you're going to jump to. There's a rudimentary version of that if you press the Q key on your keyboard. So if I hold Q, you can see that disc kind of appears. It's another way of just kind of moving around the space. So when you let go, you'll jump to that spot. So if I go near this gap, hold Q, you can actually jump over the gap. That was pure coincidence that I got to do that for. Okay, so let's show you some slightly more things. So given that FrameVR has quite a lot of polish and it does look nice out of the box, there's no reason why we can't have that. We just need to we need to add it as code. One nice way of doing that, so there's these two A-frame effects. Well, there's actually three. There's one called God Rays, which isn't working particularly well at the moment. So, but Toon and Bloom work quite well. Toon is, well, I'll just show you. It doesn't really give you too many options, but if you press insert and reload, you can see the way that the scene is rendered is slightly different. And
so is it a cartoon effect?
Yeah.
You can have a toon shader. So if this was a complex scene with a lot of objects and the objects have materials like textures, they will also be cartoon rendered. So everything's sort of.
All of them, or just the last one?
All of them, yeah. So it's an effect that's applied to like everything you see. Maybe actually now we'll show you kind of like loading models and that sort of thing, so you can actually build a slightly more interesting scene. So another snippet in here is A-frame GLB model, and Kristina earlier was actually loaded a GLB into the A-frame scene. Similarly, you can do that here. GLB is a file format which is kind of set up for 3D models to be more compatible with things like WebVR. There are so many different types of sort of file extensions for 3D models, like GLTF and OBJ and I think DXF and things like that sort of thing. Maybe we'll talk about converting models and that sort of thing in a second. For now, there are 3 kind of like sample models which we've put on the platform, which you can just kind of like chuck in the Steam just to kind of play around with. A fox, a rabbit, and a tree. So I'm going to try loading a tree. I'll show you how to load your own model in a minute. Now I'm going to set it off a bit further in the distance, so -10, and maybe over to the left, -3. And I'm going to insert that. And we have a tree.
So this is a low poly model, but it could be a high definition model. It can be depends on the speed of your computer.
Yeah.
But you can load quite complicated models with a lot of materials, and different textures, and high definition. This one is just low poly, so that your machine's not right.
Yeah, and also given that it's being hosted on the platform, low poly models just take up less space.
What's the limit?
I think the upload limit is 100 meg at the moment. Yeah, what are they going to show you next? Okay, so maybe let's add another one. A-frame GLB. Let's add a fox. Put it over to the other side. I'm going to make this fox massive, and I'm going to raise it up a little bit further.
Where's it gone?
Where is the gone? What have I done? Well, let's look at the code.
It's probably a small syntax.
I think I'm stuck in furniture.
Try and refresh.
X, Y, Z.
Oh, that looks nice.
Oh, maybe it's up in the sky. Oh, it's up in the sky.
So did you just position that high then?
Yeah, I did. I thought by scaling it big, it would need to go further up, but I think that isn't the case. So we can just try moving that back down. So the fox in the code is here.
So there's no physics.
Not yet, but I'll show you that in a sec. Let's move this back.
Oh yeah, I know why.
Okay, I need to go.
I think that is.
So I just turned shadows on basically, and I thought that was in there as standard, and I'm sorry there's not. But anything that you want to receive shadows, you have to explicitly tell the engine that it should receive shadows. That's only for like computational reasons, because it adds another layer of kind of like computational cost if to compute shadows. Anyway, if you find your floor, and then you can add, so you can, it should look like this for you, but you can actually add another, what we call an attribute called shadow.
Is there a list of attributes?
Oh, you can just type the word shadow.
Is it on your wiki? Have we got a list of attributes? Yeah, it's literally like thousands.
Yeah.
Have we got a link?
We haven't written our own documentation for that, but there's A-frame documentation which we can either sort of like condense down or something like that.
Yeah, I think what we will rather.
Is that just for the directional light or the ambient light as well?
So ambient lights don't cast shadow, but there are other lights as well which we haven't put in, but there's like point light and spotlight. So Kristina asked how you add a texture. So this is a bit of maybe new terminology for you if you're not from a 3D world. This box has a texture on it because it already comes with colors, basically. So we can add those textures to other objects. So say I want to add a texture to this big block. First, in the same way that you add a GLB file, so add files to use, I want to add some kind of JPEG. Do I have any in here? Let's just find one. Bricks JPEG. There we go.
It was common texture.
So I'm going to save this, save image as. No, bricks. Bricks. Go back to accelerate. So now I should be able to add my brick image. Yeah, it's there. Make sure that is actually there. Maybe that didn't upload. Let's try again.
Yeah, that's weird. It should be there.
There we go. Okay, it appeared that time.
So it has to be in the list, otherwise you can't access it.
Then I think, if I remember rightly, so this is something that will eventually become part of this kind of more convenient editor business. But for now, if you find the thing that you want to texture, which is going to be one of these boxes, it's the box which is white. I believe you can just give it a source image and give it the name of the file.
That works then.
Hey.
That's it.
Okay, so just very quickly show you this box is now textured, and just show you again what that looks like. So you find.
You can make the text bigger actually, Josh, by
Yes.
using the magnifying glass on the
Yes. So you find the thing that you want to texture, and then a bit like earlier that we added another attribute, you just add one. It's little bit misleading, but it's this source word again, source, and then give it the name of the file that you've just uploaded. So that is the file which we uploaded here, brick.jpg. It needs to be exactly the same, and then that will appear, and it will kind of override this. So this color is now irrelevant. So we could delete it if we wanted to.
We do the input.
The import a GLB file.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to quickly show Jack how I added this fox, because it's a similar process. So in the A-frame GLB model snippet, you get these three options: fox, rabbit, or a tree. I've already added a tree and a fox, so maybe I'll add a rabbit. I want this rabbit to be big as well. So I'm going to make it a little bit bigger by making these numbers bigger, and make it a little bit higher, and over to the right, left. And now I've got a giant rabbit.
But you can also, if you want, just add your own.
Yeah.
And you've got some.
So there's a little bit more of a process, so only a tiny bit more of a process, but you need to use another one of these buttons to import your own GLB model. So see here, it says add files to use. So you effectively need to add files to the document. And this is how you would also add images if you want to add materials or audio for audio effects. And
this is what we're going to try and do after the break, right?
Yes. So adding your own GLB, you need to browse to find the file. And I think I've got some in here. I've got one called Apollo GLB. Let's see if that works. It loads. You can see here it gives you the file uploaded and then the extension, which is GLB. You need to remember the file name that you used because you need to reference it afterwards. So I'm just going to copy that. Then open up your snippet editor again, same place, GLB model, except now you give it the file name. Oh no, sorry, you put that in source. You just give it a name, and so SRC stands for source. Again, sorry if that's a bit like program Marie at the moment. That's something that can be a bit nicer, but for now it's just convenient. But the source is the source file that you've uploaded. So it's exactly the same file name. You need to spell it exactly the same. If it's uppercase, lowercase, it needs to be exactly the same.
So in the back end, is that feeding from a personal folder where that model's been added, or is that in one big folder with everyone's models?
So it's getting hosted on the platform. Is that right?
It's connected. Yeah. Okay, so technically what's happened is Josh selected a file on his local computer. It was uploaded to our server and then associated with the document. So it's owned by the document and it's an asset belonging to the document.
Okay, so if I was in another document and I typed that GLB,
Oh,
it wouldn't work.
It wouldn't work. No.
But it's an interesting question.
if you were to open up the document on a completely different machine though, and if you went back to the same URL, the files would be there.
Yeah, sorry, if you go to a different document, that's not there anymore. That's the problem. So when you upload a custom model, it's only in that one document. So if you then open that document up on a different computer, that's fine because it's stored on the server. But if you went to a new document and you tried to add your own model that you'd uploaded to this document, that wouldn't work. At the moment, you'd have to upload that your model again. But having thought about it, it might be a really good idea just to have a big store.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the framework's submitted already.
Yeah.
For that.
So that means it's, yeah, that's quite, we need to stick it on the list. Let's see if we can do it quickly, cheaply, and simply.
Yeah. So
That's starting to look really mad.
yeah, I think
It's the spaceship that's made it.
yeah. Is that the Apollo lander?
Jack's asking if there's OBJ support, but I don't think so.
No.
No. That's why we keep banging on about GLBs, because it does need to be in that format. Just because it's
Basically,
web friendly.
The way it works is for good high definition rendering, it's better to use the GLTF and GLB format on the web, because otherwise there's loads of translation, lots of mess and spaghetti. And so it's easier just to open your OBJ up in Blender and export as a GLB. And that'll save you time and it will make your objects more compatible.
Right, it looks like Rob's created a Ready Player Me avatar and obviously exported that as a,
Oh, cool.
as a-
Okay.
As a GLB.
GLB.
You should be able to.
I think he's put that in the, if that's right, if I'm reading that right, Rob, is that what you've done? You've managed to-
Yeah. I just made my own one. I was messing with it earlier, and it went straight in. So it's pretty
That's
cool.
great.
Great.
That's fantastic. I think you can actually, Josh, I think there's a way to set that as the actual avatar
Yeah.
by loading it in the player.
Yeah. Which
Anyway, that's great. Great stuff, Rob.
so
We're in good shape then.
yeah. I mean, is it worth just very quickly showing you the physics and then we have a break? Because then that's everything you need to know to then do the bit afterwards to make it.
Yeah, okay, let's do this.
All right.
This is when the whole page will explode.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is arguably the best bit because, like, placing things in a scene is, it's fun, but it
And you can also
has
move
its
them around.
limitations.
You can grab them with the E key, right?
Yeah, you can move them around. So I could move this giant rabbit. Get out of the way. I'm actually, to show you this, maybe I'll just make a new document because it's a mess. Right, I'm going to add.
I tested this morning.
I'm going to add a box, and I'm going to set its position to be -3, 2. Sorry, let's rotate it a bit, something random. So these are all kind of values in degrees. So I've just put some random numbers in X, Y, Z. So it's going to spin it around a bit. Let's just make it 1, 1, 1. Body.
The position, the 0, 2, and 3, what is that in
So,
X, Y, Z.
yeah, so it's an X value, a Y value. So Y is up and down in
okay,
this
so
rod.
the -3 is,
Yeah, so that,
so if the minus something.
It means it's 3 meters away from the center.
Yeah.
Oh, so you push it, so,
yeah,
Z is this way,
right,
as a dash.
yeah. And annoyingly, you start off facing in the negative direction. So if you want to move things away, it's minus.
minus.
Try and get-
Set this
I think
to
it doesn't
dynamic.
work.
Let's make it even higher so it bounces a bit.
Yeah.
Hey, okay.
Box works.
So we have a dynamic box. And also, I don't know if you've noticed, there's this random button. So we can just add a bunch of random boxes. Let's see what that does. Let's move it back a little bit. Cool. So now things have physics. And it pulled up.
This is loads of
Take me
fun.
with you.
Just chucking off things that other people and then
All right, maybe now's a good time for coffee.